Okay, we're going to look. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. We have Slido. I don't know if we've announced that just yet, but Slido. You go to slido.com and you have in hashtag InsideOut2017. If you don't want to give me the question directly, you can put it on Slido, and we'll see it here. I'm going to invite the rest of the panel to join us. Ask each one of them to give their kind of thoughts and response to what Thomas has said. And then we'll get into questions. I want them to ask each other questions. I want you to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll have to ask questions, right? And nobody wants that, right? So, okay, here we go. So Tom Jenner from Oriel Ventures, Richard Brinley from Vibrant Media, Nick Flood from Dennis. So if I can invite you, Tom, to give your point of view, some thoughts on the world of ad blocking. What does this mean? Far away.
Sure. Well, hi. Oriel Ventures is, as Thomas mentioned, founder member of the Coalition for Better Ads, and we're a tech provider in the industry to help publishers to recover ads. We also do provide a messaging platform and analytics. So, and I'm also a former colleague of Thomas's as well at Google, so I have that perspective as well. Our perspective at Oriel is, having looked at this problem globally, we're working with publishers everywhere, that there is that as Thomas said, this is a very individual problem with publishers. Some publishers are at 40% ad blocking, others are at 5%. A lot of the factors that lead to that have to do with your percentage of mobile ad blocking, of mobile users, because mobile ad blocking is very minimal at this stage. If a lot of your revenues are coming from desktop, you're going to see a much higher impact and also a higher opportunity for recovering the ads that are there. But like Thomas said, I think there's having a comprehensive plan for how you deal with ad block users is important, but not dealing with them or thinking that you have to just be really nice to them is not something that that most publishers today are feeling that's an appropriate approach. I think over the last 2 years, people have tried a lot of things, tried the soft walls, tried a lot of general kind of be nice to users approach, hoping that they wouldn't go away. And 3 things have happened. One is that they haven't gone away. They've continued to consume your content for free. Second thing is that when publishers have experimented with simply delivering ads to ad block users, they've also stayed, and they also don't go away. So they are happy to consume what they can for free, but just like people who use proxies to consume Netflix, when Netflix says, sorry, no more proxies, they continue to view Netflix the way that they are allowed to. So users will take advantage of whatever technology they have available, but still really do value content and also the speed of interaction. And I think what's also been really interesting to us is how much users are doing now to step up the ad block technology that they use. 30% of all ad block users are now blocking your analytics as well. So as Thomas said, sometimes it may seem to publishers as if it's kind of tailing off, or maybe it's flattening out. The reality is you're simply not seeing those users anymore. They are blocking your Google Analytics, they're blocking Parse.ly, they're blocking Chartbeat, they're blocking ComScore. You're not seeing them unless you're taking kind of quite extraordinary steps or using technology that can see that's actually happening. And that then has a knock-on effect on all the other things that you're trying to accomplish. So if they're blocking your pre-roll, that's something that, but not blocking the tracker that is tracking all the video views, maybe that's going to throw off your numbers in some way. If you're thinking that by not addressing the ad block users, you still have this really high ComScore number to demonstrate to people, actually your ComScore numbers would be 5–10% higher if you were actually tracking those ad block users as well. So they're not even giving you that. So our perspective is that as part of a balanced diet, ad recovery is an option, and that's something that we talk to people about.
So there's actually that wider perspective of the other different revenue streams and different audience tracking things that you need to do as a publisher that are disabled by this new generation of ad block tools and capabilities. And let's say a user that's a bit more engaged with saying, like, my data means something to me. I'm not going to part with it on, unless I'm actually urged to by the publisher.
Yeah, I mean, you can tick the box and try something, and that's great. And maybe your boss isn't bothering you about it anymore, or the board members are not anxious about it because people have stopped talking about it quite so much in the news, which is great for your day-to-day. But in order to kind of look ahead and see what the revenue opportunities are for 2018 and what you could be making money on, as Dilip said, this goes straight to your bottom line. So there are opportunities there if people choose to look at them.
Is this news to many of the publishers in the room, or is this all stuff that you're familiar with, working on? Show of hands, yes, no?
Yes, I am now.
That's all right.
Both, yes and no.
Okay, yes. So how many people are aware of this, of the challenge of ad blocking? Yeah. Okay. How many people have implemented tools to recover revenue? Okay, so less. How many people are seeing that and understanding that scope of not just ad blocking but code blocking as well? Okay, so fewer. How many people are not yet recovering revenue with ad blocking? Okay, all right. Okay, just wanted to sort of get a temperature of where we're at. So, thanks, Tom. I'm going to ask Richard now to give us his perspective.
Thank you. So we've been around for a while. We've been in market since 2000. We're an ad tech company, but we sit between the demand side and the supply side, and we have over 2,500 publishers in our network right now. So we're providing advertising technology solutions for publishers, effectively bucketing them up into particular contextual segments, and then selling the contextual audience to advertising agencies across the board. Primarily, we're an in-content advertising provider, so we're not a traditional display advertising provider. So we have found inventory units, if you like, within the content. So that's where we're at, and we've seen ad blocking on the rise for years and years and years. So it's refreshing to see that people are taking an active part in trying to combat it. We first got into this a little bit back in October 2013, where we commissioned a study to find out why people are starting to block ads. Now that study, the top three results were 74% of people found ads intrusive, 55% of people found them invasive or annoying, and 54% were complaining about it interrupting their flow of reading web information based on load times, for example. So based on that information, obviously what we started doing is looking at each of those individual things and seeing what we could do about it. And kind of the really interesting analogy that you came out with about bailing out versus blocking the whole is really, really interesting. Because I guess what we started doing was trying to block the whole thing. And more latterly, we've started looking at how do we start bailing out the boat. So on the blocking the whole side of things, users, we should not blame users for wanting to block ads if ads are annoying. I mean, if you go there and you've got things flashing up all over the place, and I think particularly on the mobile side of things, I go to a mobile website and I can't read the content because it's going up and down and up and down. I've got no idea what's going on. I scroll up a bit and then stuff jumps. It's just really, really annoying. And that's when you get to the point where people start going, oh, how can I get rid of this horrible user experience, and start blocking things. So I think a lot of the work that's being done on the Coalition for Better Ads side of things is really good. Some of the approach, I'm sure we'll discuss a little bit later, I don't agree with, but that's the opinion of myself and a bunch of other people. However, that removal of invasive units, I think, generally speaking, is a good thing. So, what we've seen is that relevance is king. So, if you put ads in front of people that are not relevant to either the page or the user, there's no value to that user at all, and that's where they start getting annoyed by the user experience. We've been working in contextual advertising for 17 years now, and we saw a dip sort of 3 or 4 years ago when programmatic started hammering the industry, but we've started also seeing a resurgence now. So it's interesting to go back to the panel discussion we had this morning about whether it's premium published content which you pay for, or whether it's advertising, and that there was a discussion around whether the advertising industry is declining, but actually in reality we've seen an uptick in the last 2 quarters about the number of IOs that are coming through and the amount of advertising revenue that we're being asked to place with our publishers. So we're seeing a degree of resurgence in the industry on that side of things, and particularly around contextual relevant advertising as opposed to programmatic. So we're doing an awful lot of tech around there. So I think that the relevancy side of thing is key. Engagement is another thing. So going away from dull old banner ads and going into more immersive user experiences, advertising as content is the Super Bowl model, right? People watch the Super Bowl and people buy ad spaces on Super Bowl. It gives them interesting advertising experiences, and that becomes part of the user experience. So I think Outstream Video is a very good contributor to that, but other things like bringing content-rich advertising units in front of the user so that they can look at those sorts of things and consume content as advertising is a really, really nice one as well. And as a result of those sorts of things we've been working with clients and agencies direct over these kind of experiences. We've seen initial engagement rates up by 250% with these engagement-rich content units. We've seen interaction rates up by 40 or 50% as a result of having these engaged content units. And we've done a whole bunch of studies in the industry around if the user sees this format versus this format, what do they think? And largely it's very, very positive. So trying to bring a more positive user experience to the advertising industry is one of the things we're trying to do there. Then we look at other things like, okay, so we brought a more positive user experience, but that's great, but what happens if the user is continuing to go down the route of blocking advertisers? Okay, so we look at some of the options that Google are talking about on the beta side. We've been talking to publishers around giving them technology similarly to what has been talked about on Google's side, which gives them that option to be able to say, first of all, messaging to the user, guys, you have to understand that as publishers, we have to pay people salaries. This content is not free. It's the same way as a lot of people, and most people here wouldn't try and rip DVDs off the internet. They'd go and buy it. Effectively, it's stealing. I mean, it really is. And I had a really interesting conversation with my daughter because she's in that 18-24 group, and I said, we were having a discussion about what I did for a business and what I did for work, and we talked about advertising industry, and I said, so what do you do? So I've got an ad blocker installed, and I said, right, I'm just going to take away half your allowance now. And she said, what? I said, well, notionally what you're doing and your friends are doing is cutting my salary, cutting my ability to earn money. So why don't I just cut your ability to earn money as well? And she had a thought about it. She thought about it. I actually didn't think about that perspective at all. And it's like, okay, so it's an educational process. So we need to educate the user as to why they shouldn't be blocking things, because people work hard on producing this original content, and everyone has to get paid. And right now, outside of premium content, such as you were discussing earlier, I subscribe to Financial Times. So I'm a premium content subscriber. I also subscribe to Netflix. So I am a person that pays for content. But outside of that, the industry is fueled by advertising, and people's salaries are paid by advertising. So as long as the experience is good and you're not annoying users, people have to get to the point of accepting advertising as a medium. So the education process is, giving the publishers the ability to have a light script on their page that they host, which informs the user about the issue, and then gives them that opportunity to say, look, okay, we'll unblock you as a site, or even get to the point of saying, actually, we're just not going to give you access to any content at all if you don't unblock us. I think that's a conversation that has to come with a number of publishers. And that's a conversation we're trying to have with a number of publishers, almost like the Coalition for Better Publishers, if you like, which is trying to get a group of publishers together that have a common theme, which is, okay, let's have a look at all of the automotive publishers in our network. Can we get all the automotive publishers in our network to agree to install the same small piece of script which informs the users about the issue and the choice, so that they can't go somewhere else and get that content for free if they don't do something around their ad blocking choice. So that's the sort of informational consent side of things around soft walls and hard walls. It's one of the things we're doing. And then I guess finally, we're also looking at ad recovery solutions. We've been talking with Tom and his guys. We've talked with a number of other technology suppliers, and we're in that sort of privileged place where we already have 2,500 plus publishers in our network. So we've had direct relationships with all those publishers. So, you know, enabling a solution such as the guys from Oriel are working on to put that solution in front of our publishers, and they don't have to have a direct relationship with a third party, but they can do it all through us as a managed service, is also something that we're looking at and working on actively in the industry.
Okay, so enabling that value exchange discussion through technology, not just our publisher side, but from the ad side as well.
Absolutely.
It makes perfect sense. Okay, well, that's pretty comprehensive. Good. I'm going to ask Nick to fire away.
Hi everyone, Nick Floods, Product Director at Dennis Publishing. For those that don't know Dennis, we are a niche publisher, about 15 websites in 4 key verticals: automotive, technology, current affairs and lifestyle. And I'd like to think Dennis has tried to be as open as possible with everything we've done around ad blocking. We've posted and shared with our kind of current partners source points, lots of information and analytics around what we've done and some of the successes we've seen. But I think I'll just start off by saying I don't think ever in my kind of 10 years in kind of online media have I ever seen it so tough for publishers. You've got different platforms, instant articles, AMP, Apple News, all kind of eating our lunch. You've got ad blocking, you've got the rise of programmatic, and obviously Dennis being a very direct sell driven business. So it's quite amazing actually that only 13 publishers actually gave research data for the AOP research, because I bet the number's actually a lot bigger. And it's actually amazing as well when you look at how many people put their hand up in this room, if they're actually doing something about it. I mean, come on, there must be millions of pounds a month actually being lost across the network of premium publishers. So I just want to kind of start off by saying that people should get a little bit more passionate about this, because if everyone actually found out that half their editorial teams were installing AdBlock Plus, which I'm sure they do, they'd have probably something to say about it. So I think people definitely need to take this a little bit more seriously.
Can I interrupt you there and say, just based on the discussion we're having so far, does anybody feel like they're going to be treating this issue more seriously than they were before they heard the discussion? Is anybody feeling that coming on?
One person.
Yeah. Okay, because we're probably going to keep hammering this a bit. So,
it's down to priorities, isn't it? I mean, most businesses are kind of doing all right now. If you are a niche publisher, you're probably still commanding quite high CPMs. If you're a commodity publisher chasing kind of celeb news, your yields are decreasing massively. You're under pressure to generate more money, and what that means is putting more partners or different types of ad units on the site, so you're actually making the problem kind of worse. But I think if you actually look at the numbers, and as Tom mentions, your numbers are definitely going to be skewed. The amount of publishers I speak to that are still using Google Analytics to track ad block rates, it's just rubbish. It just doesn't work. The number of people, obviously there's the question there that are paying IO to think that all your impressions are being unblocked. It's not true again. Users have to opt in to that option. So the scale of the problem is actually a lot bigger than any of us know about it. And just coming back to Thomas's point about the leaky boat, I mean, for us, you know, mobile is growing exponentially, and for all publishers in this room, I'm sure it's exactly the same. We still drive the majority of our revenue from desktop, but that switch is kind of happening. So we see about 20% ad block rate across our network on desktop, and it's still sub a percentage point on mobile. But if you look at the APAC regions, if you look at India especially, actually, with the lack of good, decent internet connection, people are installing browsers with ad blockers actually built in from scratch. Firefox have one. They haven't promoted it too much, but that blocks all cookies, all tracking scripts, and all ads, and that's Firefox. So they've not even really shouted about that yet. So if you look at the different territories that you may operate in, I'm sure you'll see quite varied ad block rates. So just to kind of touch on some of the pieces we've done actually, we introduced a hard wall on Carbuyer after a lot of tests, actually. We found that soft, kind of dismissible messages are just a complete waste of time, so don't even go there. So kind of engagement rates of like 3%. But actually, if you've got content that you believe in and you think has value to the user, and coming back to the value exchange, then people will kind of opt into ads, will whitelist them. So in a recent test we did, we saw 70% of users opt in to continue onto the site and view adverts through an ad recovery solution. We saw up to 30% of users whitelist a site before being allowed in. And we also tried some video kind of pre-roll ads. So watch a 30-second clip and we'll let you in with an ad-free experience. And saw 70% view-through rate on that. So I think actually users, if they want to read your content and it's good enough, will actually kind of engage with you. I think it's incredibly hard for everyone to come up with a kind of viable solution that works across all publishers. It's just not going to happen, is it? So I actually think that Google, Apple and the like, those that actually control the browser experience, are the best place to start from an ecosystem perspective. I think the Coalition of Better Ads is an excellent initiative and has definitely cleaned up a lot of things already, but we are really just at the start of this. I mean, 20% of all the impressions is across all 40 kind of AOP members is billions a month. So you're literally losing millions. I just want to press on that point, millions of pounds. And when things are tough, what goes first? It's editorial, commercial roles, and then it's just a vicious circle to kind of go down, and your site will just get smaller. So I just want to impress on that point. It's really, really critical that we try and find a solution for this. The kind of wider industry will do its piece, and we are undoubtedly the kind of side product of it. So if someone's viewing a streaming site, someone's on gambling sites, whatever it may be, where they're getting inundated with ads, our sites at Dennis are really decent. We don't have too many MPUs. Yes, we have billboards, but it's a pretty decent experience actually. And the CTRs we still get are amazing. Advertising does work, especially contextual stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because, like you mentioned, the complexity. And by the way, you can all ask questions, right? There's Slido if you don't want to raise your hand as well. But in the space in between, I'll fill in a bit. As you've said, probably never more complex and challenging for a publisher. You've got multiple revenue streams, endless technology options of how you can deal with those, but you're still putting ad blocking up there in your list of priorities. Where would it be for you?
At Dennis, it's definitely a top 5 issue, and it comes along the same kind of themes really. Diversification of revenues. Publishers need to get a lot better at all these different strands. I mean, at Dennis, we've tried and succeeded. I'm sure everyone knows about Buycar, to completely flip some of our businesses and generate direct transactional revenues. E-commerce, everyone's following in this room, I'm sure, with Best Buy guides and everything else. But fundamentally, I mean, if you look at e-commerce, all those widgets still get blocked by an ad blocker, so it comes under the same umbrella. So for us at Dennis, it is a big thing. But I would just stress, probably the most important thing you can do is actually find a point person to run it. A product person is probably best. We found actually that the knowledge around ad blocking in the AdOps world is actually really good. So the AdOps teams will talk to each other. Why am I getting all these discrepancies? My IAS report is way off, but they can't really find a solution. So you need to find that kind of commercial head who can try and explain to your MDs, your CEOs about what a substantial issue this is. Because the median loss, what was it, 200k?
500.
500k. I mean, how many staff is that? It's mental, isn't it?
It is crazy. I mean, that's part of the reason that we're having sessions like this and also putting the numbers together so we can share them with you, because we are encountering some of our members who are saying, I'm having trouble getting this on the agenda in my organisation. So we want to bring that knowledge around and show the opportunity as well. Is it particularly difficult to recover revenues?
It is. So, yeah. Much like ad servers when they first started off, there were loads and loads of difficulties. I never saw so many kind of ad block companies in the first kind of 3 months when it started to become a thing. I had people rocking up to the office without a registered address for their business, claiming they could recover ads, but just trying to find out what was actually legit and not. No company is perfect. It's still really early days in the grand scheme of things. I don't think we'll find permanent ad block solutions probably for the next couple of years. If you speak to a number of providers that can do recovery, it's not the full ad, it's a backup GIF. It will only work some of the time, it will only work on some browsers, it will only work on some machines, it won't work on mobile, will work on desktop. There's all these different intricacies, but I think where you need to really start off is actually just get the analytics in place. It really is a kind of very simple script. You can whack it in with your tag manager or something else, literally a couple of hours, and you can start to understand what impact it's having on your business. That's probably one of the key things to actually find out how much it makes a difference to you.
Yeah, I just want to address this highly controversial question at the bottom. Whoever put that, thank you, because the point is. So I'll read out. It's often been said that combating ad blocking is a cat and mouse game. How much ongoing effort is required for publishers? That's
Lots.
kind of where that question was going. Actually, I just want to sweep across the panel. If it's a cat and mouse game, what do you there'll be people out there going like, oh my God, I've got X amount of revenue streams. Okay, I realise it's important because I'm losing money, not just from ads, but also across my other revenue streams from code blocking. But how much effort goes into this? Is it worth it? What's going to come back to me? So, quick sweep across you.
Actually, if I can start, I think at the beginning when this problem came up, I think a lot of people saw it as a cat and mouse problem. And unfortunately, if you look at it like this, the ad blocker has technology-wise the upper hand because of the way how browser infrastructure works. Extensions are the last things that do anything. And then, Dennis, as you mentioned, there are increasing browsers that have ad blocking built in anyway. So, technically, it's not even just cat and mouse. You really don't stand a chance. But I think how we have shifted it is that it's not about fighting against ad blocker. It's having the dialogue with users and also understanding why is it that users installed it in the first place and trying to fix the problem at its root as well. And so I think once we get away from just try to find a technical quick fix, this is not going to work. It needs to be a more comprehensive a program where we really need to address the really bad ad experience bad user experience that's going on, and also having the dialogue with the users as well. It's in dialogue with the users that we can solve it.
Yeah, so you're talking about the 25% of the 0.5% that are starting to interact
Yes.
with the program that you created.
And kind of just they will interact, but you need to push that agenda. So you'll definitely have people in your business that were saying, oh, but what about this revenue? What about this revenue? Maybe you're a classified site and you're relying on conversions, but you still might have a display sideline. The users, if they want to use your site, will interact with whatever modal type messaging you give them. If they think there's value in the service that you're offering, then they will engage. And yes, you will lose people. We lost on the test on Carby, 30% of users just kind of bounced, didn't want to interact, but we weren't monetizing them anyway, so it's literally a net loss. And I think better than cat and mouse, it's actually in-browser knife fight. I think someone once called it that. That's a lot better.
Yes. So, Tom.
Well, I'll just caution everyone that you've heard everything that I'm about to say, and you'll hear it from me. So take it with whatever grain of salt you have with you. But there is that cat and mouse approach in that the ad blocker developers out there are always trying to defeat ads. They are fundamentalists about ads. They don't want to see them. They think they're bad. They think they're a blight, and they want to defeat them. And yet, at the same time, they also don't want to pay. So that's where they live. At the same time, there's this kind of feeling like we've all heard about hackers. We see movies about hackers and developers. Apologies to all the developers in the room, but the ad block developers are not the brightest knives in the drawer, sharpest knives in the drawer either. They aren't. They just are the most dedicated and the most committed. So we've developed, and I again caution you, but we've developed proprietary patent pending devices that solve a lot of the cat and mouse problem. So it's not that we're not ever vigilant. We are. But from a publisher perspective, there's very little any publisher has to do. There's no manual updating, changes to things they have to do. With our platform, I think it is rife, and as Nick said, there are a lot of solutions out there. They're all kind of competing and all saying very similar things. So testing is really quite important in order to see what works. But not testing because you feel like, oh, it's just so frustrating, it's a cat and mouse game, I can't win. Reality is, as Nick said, even if you recover a portion of this, it's all found money. This is money these are users you're not monetizing in any way right now. You're not even able to claim that you have them. So being able to go in and address it in some way, applying some dev resources to it, some product resources to it, as Nick said, I think the product people get this. I've never run into a product person who hasn't said this is one of my top priorities. The people who have problems with it are the commercial people in a funny way. They're thinking, oh, I've got this big shiny thing I can go after. There's this other big shiny thing I can go after. And frankly, even the editorial teams. How many people have an ad blocker installed right now on their work machine?
I do.
Yeah, you do, definitely. How many? No, keep your hands up. How many people have an ad blocker installed? And how many of you keep your hands up if you are commercial?
Stone
Right.
them. Stone them.
Yeah, so there's like 2 of you. And I would say that actually that's a problem because all of you should have ad blockers installed. Yep. You actually should look at it from that perspective and say, wow, that is a fantastic experience. How fast is that? That's amazing. And yet the commercial people don't actually understand the problem. They understand none of the solutions. The product people get it on all those different levels. They see the discrepancies. The discrepancies are like, it's like dirt in your food. They're like, I can't even eat this. I don't even know what this is. So they get it. I get those meetings, and then after those meetings, the commercial people are like, well, yeah, it's not my priority. I think that's the conversation where we need to get data, as Nick said, installing some analytics and figuring out what the extent of the problem is, and then you can put numbers next to it.
So where do we find that reliable data that gives us a better picture of the extent of the problem?
Yeah, I would disagree with Nick. You absolutely cannot install any scripts via your tag manager because the tag manager is blocked by a lot of people. So if you want actual data, you're going to have to put script on the page. We have a script. It's a free script. There are other people who have scripts as well. But if you put the script on the page through your CMS, you'll get some data for a while. If that script gets blocked, you might have to update the script. But you can see that, and you can see it really quickly. And then again, putting numbers is a basis of assumptions that is going to vary widely depending on your own commercial output and how many ads you have on a page and the value of the ads and the kinds of ads that are there and what you think you can recover. All those different factors. And just as a plug for tomorrow's session, we'll deal with how to value the opportunity. But it's going to depend on it's going to depend publisher by publisher, and if you don't, you just have to start with data.
And actually, let me add to that it is true. It's technically very, very difficult to accurately measure it. We have quite a substantial engineering team just kind of working on this problem. But let that not discourage you. Just because it's difficult to get the exact number. Even if you have a solution that's flawed, right? Even if you know it doesn't quite give you the accurate number, it's better to have some data than not. Sure.
Totally. For those that use the likes of Taboola and Outbrain in the room and don't have an ad blocker solution, such as Oriel, SourcePoint, etc., they've actually got built-in ad block reporting within their platform. So that might be a first port of call to actually just go and see on your content pages what's your ad block rate, and that will at least give you a kind of line in the sand where you can kind of go from.
Yeah. Just a quick question again. So if you're starting to look into those numbers of how much ad blocking there really is out there, is that something you can start to share with us so we can see in there? Because I mean, let's say that people are able to measure through Taboola or whatever source it is a basic ad block rate. How much worse is the problem that we're kind of trying to communicate to people with it?
Because the product that we have is still in beta, I think it's not credible to say we really have such a clear perspective. But what we see with the publishers who've worked on it, that they were surprised how high the rate is. So my assumption, is just based on a relatively small set of publishers, is that the problem may be bigger than you think.
It also might be smaller than you think. I mean, I think we've run into this down in Australia quite a lot. They look at one particular company's very public numbers for what's happening in the market, and they're higher than we've ever seen. And we've looked into it, and we see that the way those numbers are gathered, there's a lot of false positives. But even if it's lower, when you have to your point, if you have some numbers, you can then go back and say, I've looked at this. This is where I think some of the assumptions are wrong. But if we put some numbers next to this, this is the big opportunity, and it's going to be bigger than launching that brand new ad format. Guarantee you.
Yeah, or a new site.
Yeah.
in many cases.
It's a long-term play. It's a long-term play.
Okay, a couple of questions here. So this one's getting the thumbs up. If Google is collating and rating data on poor ad experience, how heavily does the search algorithm punish the guilty parties?
So I think the fair answer is it's early days. We released the ad experience report in May, and also to be fair, like any product, it had some quirks at the beginning as well, that we need to iron out. So the next step that we want to do is in 2018 have ad filtering in Chrome. Other things may follow, but it's too early to say exactly what.
Yeah. But
So it's interesting because the ad filtering side of things. First of all, I think it's quite difficult on a publisher-to-publisher basis to see what's there and what's been filtered and what isn't being filtered, or what's being highlighted and what isn't being highlighted. And for sure, there are some false positives because I believe that a lot of the stuff that's going on right now is human. So humans are looking at, and I'm hypothesizing, humans are looking at top search pages and looking at the user experience and then making fairly arbitrary decisions about whether they think that the ad experience on that page is good or not. And certainly, we've got 2,500 publishers, so the 0.5% of our publisher should be 50. And right now, we've had one publisher who has had one page on their network that someone somewhere has said, oh, we don't like the ads that are on your page. And literally it says, you need to deal with this, or within 30 days, we're going to block that page from Google search results. Now that's not we're just looking at it, we haven't quite decided what we're doing yet. It's that's scary stuff for publishers. Google have decided that if you don't remove a particular ad technology's tags off their site, we're going to stop sending search results to your page.
Or even more than that. Let's say Dennis gets offered, $3 million from Microsoft to one time for each user just once on one day, show a pop-up that says, hey, we've got a new Windows version. That $3 million would come in quite handy, and yet Google's filtering would say, no, you can't deliver it.
We'd find a way.
I think I might have a way for you.
So there was
I agree.
The problem is
Yes.
Google is coming in and saying, no, publisher, you can't run your business that way. Your relationship with your user is actually not as good as our perception of what that should be.
I firmly believe someone needs to, and the coalition with the kind of voting rights and the way it works, I think someone needs to have that definition of kind of what's good and what's bad, or it'll just kind of snowball. I do agree. I think Google can sometimes go slightly too far, and the kind of warning about being taken out of the index and everything else, 30 days and what have you, could be troubling to a lot of publishers. But I think for the vast majority of those in this room, I think we're probably mostly going to be all right. So for those that have run it, I'm sure the reports come back positive. But what I would like to see is better input from publisher side back into that coalition. So yes, it's great you've got some publishers in there, but actually very few. And so I don't think anyone's kind of represented in.
Yeah, it's
in this
open,
room.
isn't it? But it's open with an entry fee of, I think, $100,000. So not all that easy to be involved. Although I will say that we are also in dialogue with the IAB, who are taking feedback from us into the process. So we can definitely do more in that space, and we can take that interaction. I think you're right. On balance, it's a good thing, right? That the ecosystem needs to be, resolved and cleaned up. So,
but I also think that it's a positive step to come up with some standards, if you like, but then enforcing those standards on publishers without any conversation with those publishers at all, and then putting in punitive measures to say, if you don't adhere to our standards that you haven't agreed to at all, we're going to block all your search traffic, is a little bit fascist.
Isn't it?
Yes.
I'm not sure I want to talk about fascism, but
Come on, let's do this.
but just to get the facts right. So this product isn't live yet, right? So we have announced it will happen in 2018. it has nothing to do with search index. So some
Chrome
of
product hasn't, but he's getting text that says that somebody else on search is dealing with it.
well, not from us. So
It's in the Google experience, and I think the
if you can send it to me, because I haven't seen
absolutely
it.
okay. Well, so if I can just outline, and maybe somebody else in the audience has seen this as well. But effectively, what it said is it says you've got 30 days to fix this issue. If you don't fix it within 30 days, then the next stage is that we'll block the page from the search index.
No, so what it would say is that once it's live, for a date to be clarified in 2018, Chrome will filter the ads as I have shown on the screen.
Right.
Yeah, that's the Chrome thing. He's talking about search.
Yes, so that
Yeah.
that just isn't true.
Okay. Well,
And to come, actually, I want to come to Nick's point, because Nick, I agree with you that this shouldn't be something that Google decides what is good or not. Is not the intention, and so it looks strictly at what the coalition does, and also actually the real reason why we haven't announced the date is because we agree with the point that you make, is that it needs to be in very close coordination with the coalition, so that the governance is clear that it's really an industry effort. And then the last point, like if you have this one ad for 3 million, I would still encourage you not to do it, right? But the way how we've set it up, the system is that there will be false positives, there will be some mistakes. Is that there is a certain threshold that's still to be agreed with the coalition, so that no one gets kind of unfairly incentivized to do something, right? That it's like if there's an occurrence here or there, that's not the problem that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the problem that we have a very, very small set of publishers. Maybe it's just one in your case, that is having such a horrible experience that they really drive the ad blocking that all of you struggle with. And I'm sorry to say, something kind of more forceful needs to happen to convince this small of publishers to react.
Okay, so that publisher is YouTube, right? I can't tell you how many people I talk to about ad blocking, and everyone says, yeah, when I started getting all those pre-rolls, on YouTube, actually an ad blocker takes care of all of them. My 16-year-old son has had an ad blocker for 2 years. I didn't even know it. And he's like, no, it's what everybody's doing because of YouTube. And yet, this is where it gets funny, because Apple did this over the summer, where they decided that actually in-app ad blocking, they weren't going to allow that anymore. They just announced it a year ago. Now they're not going to allow it anymore because it's affecting their revenues. And now you've got YouTube saying, Google saying, actually, pre-rolls on YouTube, those are totally fine. Those ads that follow you around the web that people complain about actively, those are fine. It's just the ones that we don't like, that we're not making money from, that aren't fine. And that's where you have a platform again that, and again, I love Google. I'm a big Google user. I got an Android in my pocket. All my friends are there. But this is where you've got large platforms, back to the first conversation that we had today, where the large platforms are making decisions that are right for them, and that publishers are really squeezed in the middle.
Totally.
But that's exactly why there is this coalition, right? That we get together.
But why not pre-rolls? If it's really about what users want.
So the coalition.
And I love pre-rolls.
The coalition has brought out an initial standard which doesn't include in-stream advertising, and is working on a standard for in-stream advertising. And then once that is out, hopefully soon, of course that will just extend the standard.
When Google has a solution for it.
This is kind of complicated research. It just takes a bit of time to really figure out data-driven, because it's easy to be on a panel and say, oh, I think because my friend Alex told me that's why he installed an ad blocker. But it's not about like people sitting on a panel to deciding what is causing an ad blocker. We need to be a little bit more scientific about it, kind of really understand what is causing the problem and then react.
Yeah.
And yes, if it turns out that the way how YouTube does certain forms of advertising, we would be the first to be happy to change it.
no, I completely agree with you, and this is what I said to start with, is invasive, annoying advertising is bad, and that's the reason a lot of people have installed ad blocking solutions. I just think it's problematic that the company that creates the largest browser, the largest using browser in the industry, and incidentally has also created half the problem because they've created that open extension mechanism within the browser that allows people who are effectively ransomware companies.
Actually, we just copied Firefox.
Okay,
You
well,
give us too
okay.
much credit.
Okay. However, that technology is available within the Chrome browser, which allows people to effectively create ransomware, which blocks advertising unless you pay money to the company to do. And I'm surprised that Google doesn't have, given the bazillions of engineers you've got, it doesn't have the technical capacity to say, okay, why don't we just organise things so that the extensions load first and then we do everything afterwards, so we can actually circumvent some of these bad uses of open technology. Is the sole arbiter in the end of deciding whether whether publishers are allowing their users to have these ad experiences, is my point of view.
Okay, so I think Thomas took a bit of a kicking there, and actually, but at the same time, I think we're all agreeing actually that there needs to be an ecosystem level response, and that we want to have our input into that, don't we, as a group of publishers? But what you can't argue is that actually what is right is that if one premium publisher is in there that is unfairly treated, we have to try to deal with that, right? But what's probably happening is that the many bad actors that are out there, the 0.5%, are and do have to be squashed, basically. And so, to me, that seems like a self-evident thing. We interact with that, we try and make it better, we put our concerns forward and try and deal with that. So, but I'm loving the controversy. Thank you very much. I just want to there were some good questions here, right? So, buying Signal. Those on the panel with AdBlock Solutions, what is your business model? Do you take a share of recovered revenues, or is it a license fee? Very quickly.
Question for Tom.
Go on, you've got to answer. If someone wants to buy, you've got to answer very quickly.
Well, look, I think in general, there are license fee solutions, but we do take a cut of revenue. We take a lower cut of revenue than what AdBlock Plus would charge you, or that what all of our competitors would charge you. But in the end, it is a revenue share because we are looking to develop the best ROI for publishers, and that's still an ongoing process.
Okay, cool. This question about Axel Springer, that point of are they able to charge a fee if you have an ad blocker installed? I think that's already been answered, right? It's pretty difficult to do that, but you do, as we discussed earlier in the previous session, if you weren't there, that if you go to your users, the average kind of number that you'll see as conversion is that 2 to 3% of those will immediately convert to subscriptions. That was in the previous session, and that sometimes we go up to 5, 6, or 7. Obviously, that varies by publishers. So the Axel Springer build example, and in fact the example that many publishers are starting to move towards, is that sort of integrated value exchange kind of discussion.
But I can give more colors, because I know the people working on this at Axel Springer is. I think what they're really saying, they're not saying they're making a lot of money out of this. What they're really saying is that by having that dialogue, that people will actually whitelist or uninstall an ad blocker.
Yeah.
So they are saying they're making a lot more money by having that dialogue, not necessarily by the fee that they kind of put there, which is exactly what we see in our product as well, that the option that we provide, that you can pay not to see advertising, is more like a psychological gimmick, but not a lot of users take it up. It just helps in the conversion.
100%. Just stick a button on your options and say you can come into the site for a tenner for 24 hours, and you watch the amount of people that will just click into opt in and see ads.
Yeah.
It is totally a psychological thing, because they then start to understand how much effort and the value of that piece of content.
Yeah. So at that level, that first level of revenue recovery is not the hardest thing to do, is it? No. Okay. Am I missing any of the other questions? So ads.txt, and so we're talking about, should we be blaming creative agencies, ad agencies? What's ads.txt going to do about this?
It's not really that relevant, I'd say.
But it's not relevant, but it's such a super important topic that, like we want to say, please all invest in having the dialogue with users, but please all implement ads.txt. There is so much fraud, misrepresentation out there. You really need to do this.
Yes, and that is a preview for our session tomorrow afternoon, in case anybody's wondering, where we're going to go into ad quality, ads.txt, and how we're managing that and trying to drive forward with it. So we're going to approach to a wrap. Anybody feel they want to say anything important that hasn't been heard yet needs to be?
Are there any women in the audience who would like to ask a question? Because I'm conscious that you've had men all day, and that's really embarrassing to all of us.
Yep. And it's
really
the
helpful.
AOP's fault. We hang our heads in shame, but please, in future volunteer. And for now, please say something.
How long do we wait, Tom?
Why do you think that 18 to 24s have such a low willingness to pay for content versus other age groups?
Don't think that
That's not true.
What
That's
happens.
true.
Actually,
But they've got the ad blockers.
no. So it's two separate things. First of all,
Okay.
they have a higher rate of ad blocking, but they're also more willing to pay for services like Netflix and Spotify.
Fine. Okay.
The real problem is, though, that whole chunk of users, how are we ever going to unconvert them from that thinking? So as they grow up, and in 5 to 10 years' time, they will literally just be accustomed to browsing and experiencing the internet in that free way. So we've kind of lost them, really. Individual publishers can do stuff, and a user may want to engage and pay for a site. But as an ecosystem of all kind of premium publishers, that user's pretty much gone, in my view.
I think there's also a deliberate factor amongst, especially the top company or top companies that are creating an ad blocking company to target those audiences. And I know for a fact, because I had this discussion with my daughter, her and all her friends are all gamers. They all go on these gamers sites, and the first thing they did after they installed Chrome and go to their favourite gaming site was get hit effectively by an ad from AdBlock Plus, which says if you install AdBlock Plus, you'll get rid of all these nasty ads forever. And so they went, oh, that sounds like a great idea, boom, and that's job done.
One click install.
One button, job done.
Actually, at Demexico, the literature, the marketing literature for that specific company was a cartoon about a young person going into a dangerous situation, and it was all kind of positioned like that. We've got to remember that this is a profit-making business that have 75 plus engineers here in London, and God knows how many more in Germany and other countries. They are going to do their damned most to continue to make that profit. We've talked internally at Dennis about what does the most disastrous scenario look like. What happens if they did a deal with some of the free antivirus companies and just AdBlock Plus becomes pre-installed on your computer when you literally turn it on? There are a number of these scenarios that can definitely happen, and they would gladly pay, I'm sure, a quid per install, because don't forget they're also an ad network as well, and they are monetizing users themselves. They are in it for profit, not for the ecosystem.
So AdBlock Plus doesn't block AdBlock Plus's adverts. Right, so it's not. There's no altruism going on there.
It's because they align with the Coalition for Better Ads. They do.
Someone back there.
Sorry.
This one was actually on Slido, I think.
Yep.
But what is the likelihood of legal action against someone like that?
I can just say that that happened, right? It happened back in Germany, and what actually happened was something very similar to what happened with torrent sites, where they separated themselves legally from the source of the ad blocking. So you have a technology which people can use for many different functions, and then you have the lists themselves, all of the ad blocking code that is being used by all the ad blocking technologies is actually lives somewhere separate and is maintained by anonymous fanboys. So
Well, they have been successful in blocking the forums and posting that content, claiming copyright intervention.
yeah.
So they've got injunctions against AdBlock's forums, all the fanboys.
Yeah, DCMA and that kind of approach, especially in the States, there's a few AdBlock recovery-based businesses that are aggressively pursuing that route. So what they're trying to do is bundle up the ad experience with your premium content, so it comes as one, and it literally is a license issue because that has more sway with the courts. Yeah.
Okay. Wondering whether to mention what I heard. Okay, I will. In our... Pardon? Yes, I'm going to, yeah. So in our last ad blocking forum, we had Oliver von Wersch of Von Wersch Partners talking about that legal action, encouraging members to get involved and other publishers to get involved, but also pointing out that one of the areas for action would be to, oh God, I shouldn't start this, but one of the biggest funders or revenue sources for I/O, he informed us, was Google. And he encouraged us to interact with Google to discuss that funding and to talk about how they might like to do less of it.
Wow.
Know anything about that? Anything?
So I think if you can find a way how not to pay for them, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
very welcome to not pay for
Hey,
them.
and I think that's all I'm getting at, right? I'm not trying to be over controversial. Just trying to think about, what are the ways forward for publishers in this scenario?
But actually on that, some of the ad blocking companies are more annoying than others. But let's not be blindsided. It's not a specific company that is the problem, right? The company, the problem comes from something else. Like even if one company would no longer have a viable business model, you have Firefox, you have UC browser, you have a lot of other traction. Don't think that kind of a legal action will solve the problem. It will not.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I use 3 different ad blockers all the time, and then when I'm debugging stuff, I turn off one or the other to see what's going on. So I agree with you. It's not just AdBlock Plus. There are other people in the marketplace, and there will always be people in the marketplace where there's a perceived issue.
Do you have ad blocking on your phone?
No.
No. Like everybody else.
But you have to be careful. Like globally, ad blocking on the mobile phone is higher than ad blocking on desktop.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of predominantly in Asia and for different reasons. But let's not think it will never happen. I think that's very dangerous to think that.
Yeah. Well, in conclusion, I'd like to thank the panel. I think it's been a brilliant discussion. The AOP is going to continue with this, looking at what we can do at an ecosystem level, looking at how we can share information with you to help you to fight the challenge and to move forward with it. And so, thanks very much, everybody. Great discussion, and thank you all for being here. So